Thank you so much, Sudeep, for joining in the third episode of our Leaders Fireside Chat, where we engage in conversation with some of the industry's most respected and experienced thought leaders in the HR fraternity to gain insight into their unique perspectives and learn more about the challenges and opportunities they see ahead. So, for the benefit of everyone who's going to be watching this, a quick round of introductions. Our esteemed guest of the day is Mr. Sudeep Ralhan. He's an HR leader with over 20 years of experience across the tech, BPO, FMCG, and startup spaces, spanning multiple geographies. He's played key leadership roles within Upstox, Walmart Global Tech, GSK Consumer Healthcare, and Accenture. And he's really passionate about inclusion, culture, and leadership. Also with us is Avinash Vichali, now co-founder at Global Talent Exchange. Avinash is a senior business professional with more than 2 decades of experience in talent strategy, and he's also been a strategic advisor to industry leaders in people function. He's currently on a mission to mobilize talent from global tech hubs to bridge the talent gap in India. As for me, my name is Samira Khanna, and I lead the content strategy at GTX. So I think we can get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Samira, for that introduction. Thanks, Sudeep, for joining in here again.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Your journey, as a HR professional, from when you started and then now at Upstox and beyond.
Sure. So I'm very passionate, as you've heard, about inclusion and diversity, and I try and apply that in my career as well. And what I've tried to do over the span of these 20 plus years is do different things across different industries and organizations. So whether it be tech services, I started my career with Polaris Software, which was doing really well at that time, and then moved to Accenture. Really built my career there, did multiple roles in different geographies and across different functions. And then wanted to explore a business, got into GSK Consumer, the best grounding one could get about really understanding and learning a business and transforming it. And then Walmart was a lot more about building a technology hub, but doing it in the context of retail and the transformation that was going on there. And then a startup opportunity with Upstox, right, which has been fun as well. But right now I'm in a break, so I'm enjoying this little bit of a break and a little bit of peace before I jump on to my next chapter.
Fantastic. Awesome. So tech, BPO, FMCG, fintech, multiple varied, experiences. So could you just tell us a little bit about, some of the important lessons you learned, through your career here, Sudeep?
Well, that would take an entire hour because there are just so many. But I think I think the one thing that I have learned is that some of the cliches are true, right? If you really want to build sustainable, meaningful careers, then I think it's important to pay attention to 2 very cliched, overused terms, but very true. The first is pay more attention to the journey than the destination. However glamorous the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow may look like, but it's the day-to-day experiences that count more. And the second is that it's life and career is a marathon, not a sprint, right? So you have to make sure that you're playing the long game. You have to make sure you're thinking long term, and you have to make sure that you're pacing yourself out to get there. And that's actually a lesson that I'm applying right now to myself. But I think these are the 2 most critical lessons that I've learned during my career.
Awesome. I think something that's really like a myth is some people who are at the top of their game. People usually assume that they've had it very smooth, very easygoing. I really want to know from you, like, what are some of the major challenges that you've had to deal with in your career, and how have you managed to overcome them?
Yeah, you've to. I completely agree. I think people generally think about corporate ladder, and that cliche is not true. So it is not a corporate ladder. It's a maze, and you have to sometimes go left, sometimes you have to go right, sometimes you have to go down, and you have to make sure that you're playing the long game. I think for me personally, the challenges have more been on the business front, and I've enjoyed those challenges. When I think about, in Accenture, for example, we were thinking about transformation and transforming learning into a much more business-centric function. how do you transform GSK, which was a traditional FMCG, into a digital data-centric organization? At Walmart, it was about taking a traditional captive and making a tech and innovation hub. Or at Upstox, where you're thinking about a startup, but maturing it into a longer-term organization. So I think these transformation journeys are often the most challenging. The traditional textbook of change management and transformation applies. But my two lessons, which I sometimes learn through some very hard knocks, is before you start off on this journey and this entire thing of transformation, it's important to listen. It's important to talk. It's important to connect with as many people as possible across the length and breadth of the organization to really understand what you're trying to achieve and how. And the second is, it's important to know who your friends are, who is going to help you along this journey, and who's going to be your sponsors, and maybe who's going to be your detractors as well. So I think these two are lessons learned during these journeys as well.
Fantastic. Sudeep, transformation, that kind of leads us to, so how has HR transformed, for you, Sudeep, from, I'm sure, when you must have started work, it must have been the personal department to now, we're talking about AI and, so many other, technologies and stuff. So how is, your journey been across this transformation of HR that has happened, Sudeep?
No, absolutely. I mean, when I started, I think HR was sort of just coming into its own, so to speak, because the tech and IT revolution was just starting in India. And HR was starting to become very, very center stage. But I think over a period of time, obviously HR has continued to take up larger and larger share of the table, so to speak, right? As these industries grew. And as, across the organizations, across industries, people realize that people, right, are possibly the biggest catalyst to a business. So I think HR has played an increasingly important role. And to me today, HR is not just quote unquote HR function. It's a business function. It's a marketing function. The way you think about your workforce, your employees, they're like your customers and stakeholders. So I think today it's a business function. It's a marketing function. But I believe that the next step is really going to be where HR leaders truly become business leaders. And I'm really looking forward to that stage. We are starting green shoots of that happening across the industry. But I think that's the next phase, exciting phase that I would look forward to.
Fantastic. Business leaders, HR leaders turning business leaders. Indeed, all of us would love to, kind of see that, happen. So, Sudeep, the current scenario where we've seen post-pandemic, right? I mean, where hiring has gone over the roof. And there was, the great attrition that happened. And then we've seen, the mass tech layoffs that have happened in the last quarter of the last year. And the market seemed to be, unsure of what's going to happen in the future, right? I mean, so for 2023 and further, how are you seeing this, panning out, right? I mean, I'm sure you must have seen such kind of situations in the past and you've kind of dealt with them. What is your take here, Sudeep?
Yes, I think all of us have dealt with these ups and downs. But I think what's different about now is that the pace is increasing, because that's the way of the world right now, right? It's textbook, right? We've been every single training program we've attended, every single HBR article we've read has told us that change is constant. But we don't believe it. We live in our own cocoons and, we do our daily work and we don't believe it until it hits us. And it has hit us in the last 2-3 years. Like you said, right? The entire shift from a sobered down environment to overhiring in so many different places, and then suddenly kind of putting the brakes on, and then a new sort of layoffs happening and hiring freezes happening. It's the sheer speed of it can be very, very overwhelming. But I believe that, the one lesson that we take out of it is that the most important attribute or skill that anyone can build for themselves is agility. At an organization level, at a team level, at an individual level. So as an organization, if you are able to quickly pivot and respond to the changing realities of the external ecosystem, and you're able to change your own business strategy very quickly, right, then you are in the right path. But if you can't, and if there's too much of internal bureaucracy that prevents you from doing it, or your people and leaders are not capable, then it's a big question mark to yourself on what you've been doing for the last few years. As a team, you've got to be able to align yourself very quickly to what the organization needs right now. And keep your OKRs and your objectives and everything that you signed aside and say we'll do what it needs to be done. And then similarly at an individual level, right, you should be able to kind of put up your hand and say, I'm flexible, I'm mobile, I'm flexible, I'm agile, I can do different things, I can build new skills, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to get this ship over the next run. So I think agility is possibly the biggest lesson that all of us have learned, sometimes a hard way, but I think it's an important lesson to learn for the next few years as well.
Super agility, the key word there.
I think all of this talk about, this transformation and this change, it has me thinking about employee wellness at the base of it. And there's no doubt that, the mental health, physical health, emotional health, everything's taken a hit during this time, be it the pandemic, now with the layoffs. So how do you suggest, first of all, at an individual level, how do you cope with this kind of disruption? Of course, by being agile, that's there. And then at the organization level, how can you make it easier for your people?
I think focusing on culture is going to be important. This is probably the time where your organizational culture will either get reinforced and validated or it will break apart. So I think if organizations are being authentic, leaders are being vulnerable, they are demonstrating proactiveness in connecting with people, in making sure that we're doing the right thing, we will get through this correctly, right? There's been a lot of focus on employee wellness and well-being, but all of it has focused a lot more on initiatives and programs, right? But this is the right time to actually think about how do you think about employee well-being during tough times? And that's really by making sure people feel heard, making sure that even if you're taking a tough decision, you're being transparent about it, making sure that you're being ethical about it, making sure that you are treating people respectfully, right? And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of examples which are contrary. So I think that's going to be the key on making sure that employee well-being goes from just a pure, nice HR buzzword and actually becomes a part of the DNA of an organization right now.
For a fun question in between there, if you could sum up, an organization culture that is, according to you, fantastic in 3 words, like what are those 3 words that you'd use?
Wow. Cohesive, connected, and high performance. I mean, which I think is an outcome, not exactly a culture attribute, but whatever. 3 words that I think define great cultures.
Thank
you. Super fantastic, Sudeep. So, Sudeep, let's get in a little more, closer to the last assignment of yours, right? I mean, fintech, which is a unicorn again, and then you also have worked with the global giant Walmart in their technology center here at India. 2 different kinds of organizations completely, right? I mean, in terms of culture, I'm sure there's a lot of rub off of the global culture of Walmart versus, the Indian organization here at Upstox. So can you tell us a little bit about how, close are these now getting in terms of the Indian, startups to the global, organizations, the culture? Do you see that there's a lot of work for the Indian startups to kind of catch up, or Indian organizations to catch up from a culture standpoint?
I'm not sure I would honestly classify it as Indian or global. That's not how I would classify it. I think I would classify it more in terms of industry and scale. So I think fintech industry is anyway a nascent industry in India and growing really, really fast, which means that we are literally figuring things as we go along, right? And that includes culture, that includes people practices and talent management practices. Similarly, Walmart was a very different context, right? You're talking about a large retail organization, but also a tech hub, which is relatively new by itself. So it's a new organization within a much larger framework, but that presents its own challenges. So I think it's not very easy to compare one with the other. But I will say that a lot of the startups that I see now, including not just Upstox, but the other firms that are doing really well, they all start with a global mindset. It's fantastic to see that, right? They're all their ambition is global, their perspectives are global. A lot of times, the founders, the leadership teams are coming in from backgrounds where they've either studied in global universities or they've worked in large organizations. So they're all starting with that mindset. So the one doesn't need to fight at the table anymore. It's really more about how do we get from here to there. And then, like I said, the definition of what a global mindset truly means differs depending upon the industry and scale we are talking about.
All right. Unless you have a very specified EVP, it's highly impossible to get that kind of talent that you're looking at. So at Upstox, how tough was it to kind of get talent, Sudeep?
I think your point is valid. At Upstox, it's been touch wood. It was relatively not that challenging because you're a well-known organization. You're doing well in the industry. So, but I think it would have been challenging, say, 3 years from now, because you're absolutely right. It's one thing to be able to attract talent quickly on the basis of the buzz that you have around you as a company, the recent funding that you got, the fact that you're in the right ecosystem of fintech, etc. But what truly helps you retain people and attract people again and again over a longer term period is a more sustainable value proposition. And I think Upstox, like many other organizations, is on its way to discovering that. As leaders, as a leadership team, we had to carefully think through decisions and sometimes take hard calls to say, this is what we are about and this is what we are not about. Because out there, if you go to LinkedIn, everyone seems to be about everything. And you have to figure out a way of breaking yourself away from the clutter, right? Everyone is offering all sorts of gimmicky benefits. Everyone has something interesting and fun to say. What do you have to say for yourself that reflects the core values of your company, reflects the kind of mission that you're on? I think being able to distill that from amongst all the information and noise is really critical to developing that value proposition. Upstox is on that journey, and I'm sure most other organizations of that stature are on that journey as well. We can see that.
Interesting.
Absolutely. So you've been a part of so many companies. I'm sure you've interacted with many others as well. So I'm going to draw out on that experience and ask you, so what are some of the best and the worst people practices that you've ever come across? Because I think we want to see both the black and the white, sort of put it together.
Yeah, I think when I think about best, for example, whenever I've seen authentic, truly decisive, but authentic, values-driven leadership, I've been very, very inspired. And I think that truly sets apart longer-term organizations from everyone else. So, for example, at GSK, Sir Andrew Whitty led a complete change of the way we think about performance management and driving performance, which was radical in the industry, right? And he took the company along on that change and did it so beautifully, right? I think that was amazing. I see Doug McMillan doing the same thing with Walmart, right? 2.3 million people. And you have to steer them in a very, very challenging environment, convert the organization into a people-led, tech-empowered organization to compete with Amazon. It's not an easy job, but I see them doing it beautifully. So that's really inspiring. And even other organizations, right? I get very envious and inspired by, say, SAP and what they do with diversity and inclusion and how they've run that charter and established a name for themselves. Look at GE over the years, right? And how they've been a fountainhead of leadership. They have a very, very systematic leadership development that they are known for. Flipkart recently, right? They've done such great work in doing the right thing for their frontline employees, improving their rankings and creating very positive experiences, completely overhauling their policies and benefits packages. So that's all very inspiring. And I keep looking at all these things and saying, there is so much great stuff going out there. But like you said, there's unfortunately not so great stuff as well. I've already referred to these things. One of the things that sort of get my goat a little bit is on the benefits front, right? I don't see organizations making enough effort to think through what their value proposition, like Avinash was saying earlier, is all about, but instead just relying on gimmicky benefits and LinkedIn posts, which I think are actually self-defeating. Or even recently, the way we've managed a lot of the layoffs and tough decisions is a great example. There are examples where companies have done it really well, respectfully, thoughtfully, and there are companies which haven't done it well at all. So I think there are good learnings to take from both of them.
So Sudeep, so we've been hearing a lot of AI, the chat GPT, and a whole lot of stuff. How do you think AI automation will change the HR industry in the next 5-10 years or so?
I think the beauty is that you can't predict it. It's proceeding at such a fast pace that it is futile to try and predict it. But think about it now itself, right? Think about sourcing and the role that AI plays nowadays on sourcing. It's fantastic, right? It's the kind of intelligent sourcing it's able to give us and reduce the throughput rates, reduce the time to hire rates. Think about payroll and automation. Think about chatbots, right? I mean, the interactions with the new age chatbots is pretty cool, and it's actually taken away a lot of transactional load from HR and HRBPs. So these are just green shoots. These are just initial examples, and just multiply that 5-6 times over with everything that's happening right now. There could be a future where you do not necessarily need HR business partners in the traditional sense anymore, right? And all the things that HR has been saying, that we want to get away from transactions, focus on value-added work, strategic work, may actually happen, because a lot of this work can maybe done by ChatGPT and do an employee interaction up to a certain point, and only goes to an HR business partner when it reaches a certain point of decision making, right? So I think the possibilities are endless, and I am no expert to be able to predict the future, but I'm quite excited about how things can go.
So you're saying most of the transactional work is kind of going to get deployed with AI?
Not just transactional, but even more than transactional. Any conversational work, for example, can go there. Policy making, right? I mean, if essays can be written and exams can be written, then why not policy documents, which is one of the biggest pain areas for any HR person. So I think these are just amazing developments.
So given with the trend that's happening, and say they were rid of these transactional processes, transactional work, and they could focus on the people aspect completely. So what would you think needs more focus, and what do you think needs to change in talent management as it is ongoing?
I think we need to change the word talent management itself. It's such a, I wish I could find the right word for it, but it is now tinged with so much of typical HR processes and HR jargon. We need to get away from that. And honestly, my experience with Upstox has taught me a lot about that, right? So how do you take something that is so cast in stone over decades by great organizations, but then try and apply it to a place where the world is being reinvented every few weeks and every few months, right? You can't do that. So how do you apply talent management on the go? So I think HR needs to think very differently about talent management in the future. We need to make it a lot more business centric and appropriate for the business in terms of cycle, processes, documents, whatever it might be. I think that's just one example of how things can change in the future.
Fantastic, Sudeep. So as a leader, and a veteran in the industry now, Sudeep, what is your one message to your fellow HR folks, and what would you recommend the candidates out in the market there?
Okay. Let me break it up in two parts, right? Let me talk about people first and the workforce. Um, these are tremendously challenging times, and these are times of change, which means that they could be times of opportunity as well. So I think it's up to us, right? So I think for everyone, the first is don't get sucked into a comfort zone. It's important to always keep your eye on what you're achieving. Stop obsessing about when is your next promotion, when is your next hike, how much jump are you going to get with your next job. But instead ask yourself tough questions to say, what have I achieved and what will I continue to achieve? Because achievement truly is the best defense mechanism that you can build around you. So that's one. Second is invest in yourselves, invest in sharpening the saw. All the multiple learning opportunities that we have today, starting from these massive online courses to customized programs in every company, are there for a reason. It's there for you to constantly invest in skills and making sure that what you're doing is truly relevant and hot in the market, right? Versus questioning yourself. And the third is building your own brand. People think building a brand is only for organizations or leaders, but that's the fundamental principles of building a brand apply to everyone irrespective of level. So what are you about? What are you known for? What are your key attributes? How are you different from everyone else? This is the question you should be asking yourself internally and externally regularly. So I think that applies for all people, HR or workforce or tech or leaders. Specifically for HR, I would say again, this is an opportunity. We've all been talking about moving on and transitioning from being corporate functions to support functions to partners to actually being business leaders. This is the right time to do it. So, keep calm. Don't get overwhelmed. Keep a glass of wine or a cup of tea handy, whatever works for you. Retain your sense of humor and make sure that you're constantly being open to learn and reinvent yourself.
Fantastic. I think the common aspect between both is, of course, learning, which can never stop. And I think individual branding, I think another key aspect for anyone, be it an organization or an individual. I think self-branding is, I think, the mantra now going forward. And then moving from HR leaders to being business, leaders. I think that's another key takeaway, here for HR leaders. So, from your life perspective, Sudeep, while you did mention that you are on a small sabbatical now, what is it that you intend to do going forward?
I'm not sure. I'm trying to apply these learnings to myself. Be open to learn, be open to reinvent. Right now, I'm in the midst of talking to several organizations that I work with to see how I can collaborate with them in slightly different ways, right? And change the model. So I'm not sure what I'll do next, honestly, and I'm actually challenging myself in that way to say, let's be open to whatever's coming my way next.
Are there any skills that you want to build personally? Any skills that interest you a lot?
I have just started taking watercolors classes, so I'm building. That's a new skill completely. I'm in a class with a bunch of young teenage people. And then there's fuddy-duddy me, a veteran, as Avinash kept reminding me. So I think that's something fun. I'm trying to, do something different. I want to build my coaching skills, something that I've often neglected. Coaching is a part of our lives as an HR leader. But I want to take time out to develop deeper expertise in that. So that's another skill that I want to build during this period.
Sudeep, thank you so much for your time. It was lovely interacting with you. A lot of insight for us to take, and we will certainly, stay in touch with you for more such sessions going forward.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being here. Thanks for challenging me with some interesting questions as well. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.